A group of bullies thought they had found the perfect victim, a quiet black girl standing alone in a crowded school hallway. So they did something cruel, something humiliating, something they believed would make the entire school laugh. They poured bleach on her in front of hundreds of students, recorded every second, and expected her to break. But here's the problem with arrogance: it makes people forget that actions have consequences. What happened next turned a simple act of bullying into a nightmare none of them saw coming. 10 minutes later, the boy who felt untouchable was no longer laughing. He was begging for mercy. Stay until the end, because this story gets more shocking with every minute. And the final twist will leave you speechless. Kiara Monroe entered the main hallway of Westbridge High just as the bell released a flood of students from every classroom. Lockers slammed. Sneakers squeaked against the polished floor. And voices bounced off the walls like the school belonged to whoever could speak the loudest. Kiara did not speak at all. She moved through the crowd with her books held tightly against her chest, her face calm, her eyes forward. It was her first day, and she had already learned enough from the stairs to know that Westbridge was the kind of school where silence could be mistaken for weakness. But Kiara was not trying to impress anyone. She was only trying to reach her next class without becoming another name whispered in the hallway. That quiet confidence was exactly what caught Blake Harrington's attention. Blake stood near the blue lockers with Tessa Vale beside him, her phone already half hidden in her hand, and Ryan Cole leaning against the wall like he was waiting for an order. Blake was not just popular. He was protected. His father's name was on the new athletic center, the science wing, and half the banners hanging in the gym. Teachers smiled too quickly when he passed. Students moved aside before he even asked. At Westbridge, Blake did not need to raise his voice to control a room. He only needed to look annoyed. And when Kiara walked past him without lowering her eyes, without smiling, without giving him the fear he was used to collecting from people, something sharp crossed his face. To everyone else, Kiara was just the new girl. To Blake, she had just broken the first rule of his hallway. Ryan stepped forward at the perfect moment and slammed his shoulder into Kiara's arm. Her books scattered across the floor. Loose papers sliding under students' feet. A few people gasped, but nobody bent down to help. Tessa lifted her phone higher, pretending to check a message while secretly recording. Blake crouched slowly, picked up one of Kiara's notebooks, and read her name out loud with a mocking smile. Kiara Monroe, he said, stretching the name like it was something funny. New girl thinks she can walk through Westbridge like she owns the place. Laughter broke out behind him. Nervous and ugly, Kiara lowered herself to gather her books, refusing to give him the reaction he wanted. That only made Blake's smile colder. "What's wrong?" he asked, too proud to say thank you. Then Blake noticed a small family photo that had slipped from between the pages of her notebook. He picked it up before Kiara could reach it. The air changed. Kiara's hand froze inches above the floor. In the picture, she stood beside her mother and older brother, both smiling, both clearly important to her. Blake held the photo up for the students behind him to see, as if he had found a weakness instead of a memory. "Oh," he said, "look at this." "Did Mommy and Big Brother send you here to feel special?" Tessa smirked behind the camera. Ryan laughed too loudly, trying to sound braver than he felt. Kiara slowly stood, her books still scattered around her feet. Her voice was low, but it cut through the hallway. "Give it back." For 1 second, the noise died. Blake's face tightened. He was used to fear, excuse, begging, maybe tears. He was not used to being ordered in front of an audience. He stepped closer, still holding the photo. "You don't tell me what to do," he said. Kiara did not move back. That small refusal embarrassed him more than any insult could have. Before he could push further, Ms. Elena Ward appeared from the classroom doorway, her eyes moving from the books on the floor to the phone in Tessa's hand, then to the photo in Blake's fingers. "Blake?" she said sharply. Return it. Now. The students shifted. Blake's smile returned. Fake and polished. He handed the photo back like he was doing Kiara a favor, then raised both hands as if he were innocent. Relax. Ms. Ward. Just welcoming the new student. Miss? Ward stayed beside Kiara until she had gathered her things. But Blake did not walk away defeated. He leaned close enough for only Kiara to hear him and whispered, 10 minutes from now, you'll understand how things work here. Then he turned and disappeared into the moving crowd. Tessa and Ryan following him like shadows. Kiara looked down at the family photo in her hand, now creased at the corner, and slipped it back into her notebook without saying a word. She could still feel the eyes of the hallway on her back. Some were curious. Some were sorry. None were brave. As the next bell rang, Kiara stepped forward, unaware that Blake was not finished embarrassing her. He had only tested the crowd. Now he knew they would watch, and in 10 minutes, that same hallway would become the cruelest stage of her life. Kiara had only made it halfway down the hallway beside the blue lockers when the crowd began to tighten around her. It did not happen all at once. First, a few students slowed down. Then more stopped near the walls, pretending to check their phones or fix their backpacks. Within seconds, the busiest stretch of Westbridge High had turned into a silent circle with Kiara trapped in the middle. Blake Harrington stood directly in front of her, his orange varsity jacket bright under the hallway lights. While Ryan Cole drifted behind her and blocked the only clear path out, Tessa Vale stood slightly to the side, phone raised at the perfect angle. She was not recording the whole truth. She was recording the version Blake wanted the school to see. Blake held up a plastic bottle filled with a white liquid and smiled like he had brought a gift. Since you're new, he said loudly enough for everyone to hear, we thought you needed a little help fitting in. A few students laughed, but the sound was thin and nervous. Kiara's eyes moved from Blake's face to the bottle in his hand. The sharp chemical smell hit her before he even opened it fully. Her stomach tightened. She stepped back, but Ryan was already there, close enough to make escape impossible. Tessa shifted her camera, framing Kiara's movement as if she were the one advancing. Everything about it was staged, the crowd, the angle, the timing. Even the space Blake had left open so the video would make him look calm and her look cornered. Move, Kiara said, her voice low. Blake tilted his head. See, aggressive already. Then he looked at the crowd. I told you she had an attitude. Kiara turned slightly, searching for one teacher, one student, anyone willing to step in before this became what she already feared it was. A boy near the lockers opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, then closed it when Blake glanced at him. Two girls looked away. Someone whispered, "Don't get involved." That was the real power Blake had at Westbridge. He did not just scare people into laughing, he scared them into silence. Then Blake stepped forward and raised the bottle. The liquid spilled over Kiara's hair and shoulder in a cold, humiliating rush. It ran down the side of her face, soaked into her shirt, and dripped onto the floor. The hallway gasped, but nobody moved. Kiara froze, her hands trembling at her sides. Her eyes burned from the chemical smell. And for one terrible second, the entire school seemed to be watching her become small. Blake lowered the bottle with a satisfied grin, waiting for screaming, crying, begging anything he could use to make the moment even worse. But Kiara did not scream. She did not give him the breakdown he wanted. She stood there shaking, silent. And somehow that silence made the cruelty feel heavier than any cry could have. Tessa immediately shouted. She came at him first. Everybody saw it. Her voice was sharp, practiced, too fast. Ryan joined in a second later, pointing at Kiara as if she were dangerous. Blake was just protecting himself. He said, though even he could barely meet anyone's eyes. Confusion rippled through the students who had only caught pieces of what happened. Some had seen Blake pour the liquid. Others had only heard Tessa's accusation. Blake seized the moment. "You should apologize," he said to Kiara, loud enough for the cameras and whispers. "You made a mess in our hallway." Before Kiara could answer, Elena Ward pushed through the crowd. Her face changed the moment she saw Kiara's soaked hair and trembling hands. "Move away from her," she snapped. Blake stepped back with fake innocence, lifting both hands. "Careful. Miss Ward, the hallway cameras are down. You don't want to assume something you can't prove." That sentence struck harder than the humiliation itself. Miss Ward froze for half a second. Kiara heard it too. Blake had not simply gotten lucky. He knew the cameras were down before he acted. "Ms. Ward pulled Kiara behind her and ordered the students to clear the hallway. But the damage had already begun, spreading from phone to phone. Blake stood there smiling, convinced that without the main security footage, he had won. Kiara slowly wiped the liquid from her cheek. Her eyes locked on his. Her voice was quiet, almost too calm. "You just opened a door you won't be able to close." For the first time, Blake's smile flickered. Ems. Ward led Kiara toward the nurse's office. One arm protective around her shoulders. Behind them, Blake was already whispering to Tessa and Ryan, shaping the lie before the truth could breathe. He thought the missing camera would protect him. He thought Kiara's silence meant fear. But he did not know that Kiara had a very specific reason for not fighting back in that hallway. And by the time she reached the nurse's office, Blake's fake story had already started racing ahead of the truth. Kiara sat on the edge of the nurse's cot with a towel pressed against her hair, trying to breathe through the sharp chemical smell still clinging to her clothes. Her eyes burned. Her shirt was soaked, and her hands trembled, no matter how tightly she folded them in her lap. Ms. Ward stood beside her, furious but controlled, speaking to the school nurse in a voice that left no room for delay. "Call her parent or guardian right now. Then document everything her condition, the liquid, all the time, the names of every student involved." The nurse looked toward the office door and hesitated. That small pause told Miss Ward more than any answer could have. "What are you waiting for?" she asked. The nurse lowered her voice and said, "Anything involving Blake Harrington has to go through Principal Grayson first." "Ms." Ward stared at her. "A student was attacked." "I understand," the nurse whispered. "But that's the procedure." Kiara looked up slowly. There it was again, the invisible wall around Blake Harrington. It was not just fear from students. It was not just popularity. It was a system. Even before Kiara had been checked properly, even before her family had been called, Blake's name was already changing the rules. "Ms." Ward pulled out her own phone, ready to call Kiara's emergency contact herself. But before she could dial, the intercom crackled. Principal Grayson wanted Kiara in his office immediately. Not Blake. Not Tessa. Not Ryan. Kiara. By the time Kiara and Ms. Ward entered the principal's office, Blake was already sitting comfortably in one of the chairs. Dry, clean, and smiling like the victim of an unfortunate misunderstanding. Tessa stood beside him with her phone in hand, and Ryan leaned near the wall. Principal Howard Grayson sat behind his desk with a tight expression, the kind adults used when they had already decided who was guilty before asking a single question. Tessa stepped forward and played a video. It showed Kiara moving quickly toward Blake, then Blake raising the bottle. The beginning was gone. The blocking, the mocking, the crowd. The moment Ryan trapped her from behind, none of it was there. The clip ended just before the liquid hit her. She threatened him first, Tessa said. Blake panicked. Ryan swallowed hard. Yeah. She looked like she was going to hit him. Miss? Ward's face hardened. That video is edited. Grayson barely looked at her. Ms. Ward, please let me handle the disciplinary process. Then he turned to Kiara with cold politeness. New students often struggle to adjust. Misunderstandings happen. But aggressive behavior on your first day is a serious concern. Kiara felt the room tilt, but she did not let her face show it. Her hair was still damp. His skin still stung. Blake still had the nerve to sit 5 feet away from her, wearing that satisfied little smile. And somehow, Principal Grayson was speaking as if she had walked into the hallway and created the entire problem herself. Ms. Ward stepped forward. She was surrounded. Blake poured something on her. Several students saw it. Then those students can submit statements later. Grayson said, "Right now, I have video evidence showing Kiara escalating the confrontation. It does not show the full event. It shows enough." That was when Kiara understood the truth about Westbridge High. Facts did not matter here. Timing did not matter. Pain did not matter. What mattered was the last name Harrington. Grayson opened a folder, pulled out a printed statement, and slid it across the desk toward Kiara. "I need you to sign this." It simply says, "You acknowledge contributing to the tension in the hallway and agree not to escalate the matter further while we review it internally." Ms. Ward looked at the paper and snapped. "Absolutely not." Grayson's eyes shifted to her. "Careful, Elena. Interfering with a disciplinary matter can go in your personnel file." The room went quiet. Even Ryan looked startled. Blake's smile widened. Kiara picked up the paper and read the first line. It was not a statement. It was a trap. If she signed it, Blake would become the boy who defended himself. And she would become the angry new girl who caused trouble on her first day. She placed the paper back on the desk with steady hands. "And if I don't sign," Grayson leaned back in his chair, "then I may have no choice but to issue a temporary suspension while we investigate your behavior." For the first time, anger rose hotter than fear inside Kiara. She looked at Blake, then at Tessa, then at the principal, who was trying to turn her humiliation into her confession. She did not argue. She did not cry. She reached into her pocket, took out her phone, and typed one message with her thumb. "Malcolm." It happened again. She hit send. Across the room, Blake laughed under his breath, thinking the silence meant he had won. But across the city, the man who received that message stood up immediately. Because he knew exactly what those words meant, and he knew Westbridge High had just made a very dangerous mistake. Malcolm Monroe was standing in his private investigation office, surrounded by folders from an old-school violence case. When his phone buzzed on the desk, he almost ignored it. His eyes were fixed on a report about missing hallway footage, erased witness statements, and a principal who had called a brutal attack a misunderstanding. Then he saw Kiara's name on the screen. The message was only 3 words. It happened again. Malcolm did not move for a second. The room seemed to go silent around him. Those words were not random. They were a signal his family had hoped Kiara would never need to send. At her last school, she had been targeted, humiliated, and blamed for defending herself after the administration buried the truth to protect the students responsible. The Monroes had left that district quietly only because Kiara had begged them not to let her pain become a public battle. But before she started at Westbridge High, Malcolm had made her one promise. If anyone tried to hurt her again and hide behind a system, they would not be allowed to control the story twice. He grabbed his coat, took one folder from the desk, and walked out without answering the message. 10 minutes later, a black SUV rolled up to the front entrance of Westbridge High. The security guard at the gate stepped forward, ready to ask questions, but stopped the moment Malcolm got out. Malcolm was not loud. He was not rushing. He did not look like an angry brother storming into a school. He looked like a man who had already read the ending and was only there to collect the evidence. The guard opened the door without another word. Inside the principal's office, Blake was still wearing his confident little smile. Kiara sat with damp hair and a borrowed towel over her shoulders, while Ms. Ward stood beside her like the only adult in the room who understood something terrible had happened. Tessa kept her phone close, ready to record anything that could help Blake. Principal Grayson was speaking in that smooth administrative tone people used when they wanted cruelty to sound like policy. Then his secretary opened the door, and Malcolm Monroe stepped inside. The change in Grayson's face was immediate. Blake noticed it and smirked. "What is this?" he said. "Her big brother coming to scare us now." Tessa gave a quiet laugh, but it faded when Malcolm did not even look at her. He walked straight to the desk, placed a business card in front of Principal Grayson, and said, "Malcolm Monroe, former federal investigator for student rights violations and institutional misconduct." The room shifted. Tessa lowered her phone. Ryan, who had been standing near the wall, looked down at the floor. "Ms.?" Ward's eyes widened, not with fear, but recognition. Principal Grayson picked up the card, and the color drained from his face. The name Monroe was not unfamiliar to him. It had appeared in a state-level investigation 2 years earlier, after another school district was exposed for deleting footage, pressuring victims, and protecting donors' children from consequences. Grayson cleared his throat. "Mr. Monroe, I understand emotions are high, but this appears to be a misunderstanding between students." Malcolm finally turned his eyes toward Blake for half a second, then back to Grayson. A student was cornered in a hallway, had a chemical liquid poured on her, was denied immediate reporting, and was pressured to sign a statement taking partial blame. That is not a misunderstanding. Blake's smile tightened. "You weren't even here." "No," Malcolm said calmly. "But the evidence was..." Grayson shifted in his chair. The main hallway camera was unfortunately down at the time. Malcolm nodded once, as if he had expected that exact answer. "I want the camera logs, the maintenance report, the nurse's documentation, the edited video submitted by Miss Vale, the names of every witness present, and the identity of whoever disabled that camera." Grayson's voice sharpened. "You can't simply demand internal school records." Malcolm leaned slightly over the desk, still calm. "Then call district council. Tell them Malcolm Monroe is here, asking why a camera failed exactly 10 minutes before a black student was attacked in the most crowded hallway in this building." No one spoke. Blake looked from Grayson to Tessa, suddenly less certain. Tessa's fingers tightened around her phone. "Ms." Ward took a slow breath, as if hope had just entered a room that had been suffocating a moment earlier. Grayson tried one last time. The camera malfunctioned. "These things happen." Malcolm's eyes stayed on him. "Cameras do not malfunction on schedule." That sentence landed like a crack through glass. Malcolm did not need to prove Blake guilty yet. Not fully. Not in that moment. All he needed was to prove that Westbridge High was already lying. And when he asked to see the backup system, Principal Grayson's silence told everyone in the room that the first lie was about to collapse. The atmosphere inside Westbridge High's security office felt completely different from the confidence Blake Harrington had displayed less than an hour earlier. What had started as a hallway humiliation was rapidly becoming something much larger. And for the first time, Blake could feel control slipping away. Malcolm Monroe stood behind the security supervisor's chair, watching the monitors with the same calm focus he had carried into the principal's office. Principal Grayson remained near the doorway, arms crossed tightly over his chest, while Ms. Ward stood beside him, refusing to let the administration bury what had happened. Tessa stayed unusually quiet, clutching her phone so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. Ryan avoided eye contact with everyone. The school's IT technician sat nervously at the main console. Sweat gathered on his forehead as he clicked through folders and system menus. "Like I said," he repeated, trying to sound confident. "The hallway camera experienced a technical malfunction. The footage from that time period was corrupted." Malcolm did not respond immediately. Instead, he studied the technician's reflection in the monitor. Every few seconds, the man glanced toward Principal Grayson before speaking. It was subtle, but not subtle enough. Malcolm had spent years investigating institutional cover-ups. He knew exactly what fear looked like. Open the system logs. Malcolm said. The technician froze. The logs, he asked. Yes. Malcolm replied. The administrative activity logs. Every camera system records who accesses it. When settings are changed, and when footage is deleted, the technician swallowed hard and looked toward Principal Grayson again. That glance was all Malcolm needed. Ms. Ward noticed it too. The room fell silent. Finally, under pressure, the technician opened the system history. A long list of timestamps appeared on the screen. Malcolm leaned closer. His eyes moved quickly across the entries until one line caught his attention. Camera 14 disabled. Timestamp, due.am. The attack on Kiara had occurred only minutes later. Malcolm pointed at the screen. Who disabled it? The technician hesitated. Answer the question. The technician clicked another menu. The administrative account used to disable the camera appeared on screen. Office Administration Access. The account belonged directly to the principal's office. Grayson's face instantly lost color. That proves nothing, he said quickly. Software errors happen all the time. The system could have logged the wrong account. Malcolm looked at him without blinking. A software error that disabled one camera. Silence. 10 minutes before a student was attacked. More silence. And used your administrative credentials. Nobody spoke. Malcolm calmly pulled a flash drive from his pocket and placed it on the desk. Export everything. The technician obeyed. Blake finally lost patience. This is ridiculous. He snapped. You're acting like somebody committed a crime. It was just a stupid school prank. The words echoed through the room. Malcolm slowly turned toward him. If it was just a prank, he asked quietly, why was the camera turned off? The question hit harder than any accusation. Blake opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Even Tessa looked away. For the first time since entering the school, Blake had no answer. The room remained frozen until Miss Ward suddenly spoke. Wait. Everyone turned toward her. Her eyes widened. There was another camera. Malcolm looked up immediately. What do you mean, Ms.? Ward pointed toward the hallway map displayed on the wall. The Media Club installed an independent camera last semester for student broadcasting projects. It overlooks the same hallway, but it isn't connected to the main security network. The color drained from Tessa's face. Blake immediately noticed. His head snapped toward her. You said you checked everything. Tessa's breathing became uneven. I thought I did. For the first time, genuine panic appeared in her voice. Within minutes, the group rushed toward the Media Club production room. The farther they walked, the more nervous Blake became. Tessa could barely keep pace. Ryan looked like he might collapse. When they entered the room, they discovered the computer had recently been accessed. The account had been logged out, and the recording folder appeared empty. Tessa exhaled in relief. It's gone. But Malcolm was already sitting down at the workstation. No, he said calmly. It isn't. He opened the recycle bin. Several deleted files appeared instantly. The room went completely silent. The technician recovered the footage. A loading bar crawled across the screen. Then the video appeared. Nobody spoke. The footage showed everything. Blake stepping directly into Kiara's path. Ryan moving behind her to block escape. Tessa positioning herself to record. Blake grabbing the family photograph from Kiara's notebook. The mocking, the crowd, the threats, and finally the moment Blake poured the white liquid over Kiara. Every second, every detail, unedited, undeniable. Ryan lowered his head. Ms. Ward closed her eyes in relief. Principal Grayson looked physically ill. Blake stared at the screen as if watching someone else commit the act. His entire defense had just collapsed. But then something unexpected happened. Near the end of the recording, After Blake raised the bottle and before the attack began, a voice could be heard from somewhere off camera. The audio was faint, almost hidden beneath the crowd noise. Malcolm immediately paused the footage. Play that again. The technician rewound. The voice returned. This time everyone heard it clearly. Do it fast, before Grayson changes his mind. The room froze. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Because in that single sentence, the story changed completely. This was no longer a bullying incident. This was no longer a student prank. Someone else had known. Someone else had helped. Someone inside Westbridge High had participated in the setup. And with one sentence accidentally captured by a forgotten camera, the attack on Kiara Monroe had just become evidence of a coordinated conspiracy. The small conference room beside Principal Grayson's office felt too narrow for the truth that had just been dragged into it. Kiara sat at one end of the table with Miss Sign, Ward beside her, still wrapped in the borrowed towel, still smelling faintly of chemicals, but no longer looking like a girl waiting to be believed. Across from her, Blake Harrington sat stiffly, his confidence cracking piece by piece. Tessa Vale kept her phone face down on the table now, as if the device itself had betrayed her. Ryan Cole looked worse than both of them. His hands shook under the table, his face pale, his eyes fixed on the floor like he could disappear if he stared hard enough. Malcolm Monroe stood near the wall, with the recovered video paused on a laptop. He played the audio again. The room filled with the faint, ugly sentence captured by the forgotten camera. Do it fast before Grayson changes his mind. Nobody spoke. Malcolm let the silence stretch until it became unbearable. Then he looked at each of them in turn. Explain it. Blake immediately turned toward Ryan. Don't say anything. That was the first mistake. Malcolm's eyes moved to Blake. Interesting. I asked for an explanation. And your first instinct was to silence him? Tessa jumped in quickly, panic hiding under her sharp voice. Ryan said it. He planned the whole thing. He was the one who told Blake it would be funny. He's just trying to drag everyone down because he got caught. Ryan's head snapped up. What? Tessa leaned forward. Don't act innocent. You blocked her path. You were behind her the whole time. Blake pointed at Ryan, too. You wanted to be part of it. Nobody forced you. Ryan stared at them, stunned. In the hallway, he had been useful. In the office, he had been a witness. Now that the evidence was real, he had become their sacrifice. His breathing grew uneven, and his eyes filled with tears. He tried to blink away. Malcolm's voice stayed calm. Ryan, this is the part where you decide whether you go down protecting people who just threw you under the bus. Ryan looked at Blake. Blake's face hardened. Ryan. But the threat did not work this time. Ryan broke. It was planned. He whispered. Tessa went still. Blake slammed his hand on the table. Shut up. Ryan flinched. But he kept talking. Blake planned it last night. He said the new girl needed to learn where she stood. Tessa was supposed to record from the side, so it looked like Kiara moved first. I was supposed to block the back so she couldn't leave. Ms. Ward closed her eyes. Disgusted. Principal Grayson stood abruptly. That is an extremely serious accusation from a student trying to avoid punishment. Ryan wiped his face with his sleeve. I'm not lying. Grayson's voice sharpened. You expect us to believe Blake somehow knew the main camera would not be working. Ryan hesitated. Malcolm leaned forward. That is exactly what I want to know. Ryan looked at Blake one last time, as if hoping for protection. Blake gave him none. Only fury. We didn't know how to turn off the camera. Ryan said, somebody told Blake it would already be off. The room seemed to shrink. Malcolm's eyes narrowed. Who? Ryan swallowed. Blake shook his head slowly, warning him without words. Who told Blake the hallway would have no camera? Malcolm repeated. Ryan's voice dropped. Coach Daniels. Ms. Ward's face went white. Even Principal Grayson stopped moving. Coach Victor Daniels was not just a teacher. He was Westbridge's disciplinary coordinator. The man responsible for supervising student misconduct reports. He was also one of Richard Harrington's closest friends. A permanent guest at every booster dinner, Blake's father hosted. If Ryan was telling the truth, then a school official had helped create the perfect conditions for Kiara to be humiliated, recorded, blamed, and silenced. Grayson slammed his palm against the table. Enough. This meeting is over. Malcolm did not move. No. Now it begins. Blake exploded. You're ruining my life over nothing. For the first time since the hallway, Kiara stood. The room turned toward her. Her voice was steady, but every word cut clean. You poured something on me in front of half the school. You lied about it. You tried to make me sign a confession, and now you're angry because the people who helped you might get caught. Blake's face twisted. You're acting like I destroyed your life. Kiara looked at him without blinking. No. Blake, you filmed yourself trying. The words landed harder than shouting ever could. Tessa looked down. Ryan cried silently. Ms. Ward stared at Kiara with quiet pride. Malcolm reached for his phone. I'm calling the school board, he said. But before he could dial, the conference room door opened. A tall man in an expensive dark suit stepped inside, his expression colder than anyone in the room. Blake looked up with desperate relief. Dad? Richard Harrington did not look at his son first. He looked at Kiara, then at Malcolm, then at Principal Grayson, and when he finally spoke, his voice carried the kind of threat money had taught him to make without raising it. This ends now. Before your family makes a mistake, it cannot afford. The real power behind Blake had finally entered the room. Richard Harrington entered Principal Grayson's office like he was walking into a building he had already paid for. He did not knock. He did not ask what had happened. He did not look at Kiara's damp hair, the towel around her shoulders, or the quiet anger on Miss Ward's face. His eyes went straight to Principal Grayson, and the first words out of his mouth told Malcolm Monroe everything he needed to know. Why hasn't this been handled quietly? The room went still. Blake sat up as if help had finally arrived. Tessa relaxed just enough to breathe again. Ryan kept his head down, knowing Richard Harrington was not there to ask for the truth. He was there to bury it. Grayson moved quickly from behind his desk, lowering his voice, as if Malcolm and Kiara were not sitting right in front of him. Richard, we were trying to contain the situation. Richard's eyes narrowed. Trying is not good enough. Malcolm watched the exchange without interrupting. He had seen this pattern before, the donor who treated a public school like a private kingdom, the principal who confused reputation with justice. The child who learned cruelty had no consequences as long as his father could write checks. Richard finally turned toward Kiara. But there was no concern in his expression, only calculation. Miss Monroe, he said smoothly, I'm sure today has been uncomfortable for everyone. Ems. Ward's jaw tightened. Uncomfortable, she repeated. Richard ignored her. My family is willing to resolve this matter privately. We can cover cleaning expenses, replace any damaged items, and perhaps arrange a small scholarship contribution in your name. In exchange, you and your family will agree not to file a complaint, not to release any video footage, and not to spread a false narrative that could damage my son's future. Blake looked at his father with desperate hope. This was the rescue he knew. This was how problems disappeared. A check, a phone call, a quiet handshake behind a closed door. He glanced at Kiara as if she should be grateful to be offered a price for her humiliation. Malcolm did not even blink. No. Richard's polite mask slipped slightly. Excuse me, no. Malcolm repeated. You are not buying her silence. Richard's tone cooled. You should be careful. Accusing my son publicly without context could expose your family to a defamation claim. Kiara looked down at her hands. Blake had poured liquid on her in front of a crowd. Tessa had edited the truth. Grayson had tried to force a confession. And now Richard Harrington was threatening to punish her for not staying quiet. For a moment, the room felt like the same hallway all over again. People with power standing around her, deciding how small she was supposed to become. Then Malcolm's phone rang. He looked at the screen and answered on video. A woman's face appeared, composed and sharp-eyed. Vivian Monroe, Kiara's mother. I heard enough. Vivian said. Richard stiffened. Malcolm turned the phone so everyone in the room could see her. Vivian's voice remained calm. Mr. Harrington, please repeat your threat. I want to make sure I heard it correctly before I add it to a civil rights complaint. For the first time since entering the office, Richard Harrington had nothing to say. Blake looked from his father to the screen, confused by the sudden silence. Principal Grayson's forehead began to shine with sweat. Tessa slowly lowered her eyes. Vivian continued. My daughter was humiliated, exposed to a chemical substance, denied proper reporting, pressured to sign a misleading statement. And now your family is attempting to trade money for her silence. If this school continues down that road, this will not remain an internal disciplinary issue. It will go to the board, the district, and every office responsible for investigating student rights violations. Grayson cleared his throat weakly. Mrs. Monroe, we are committed to a fair review. No, Vivian said. You are committed to damage control. There is a difference. The sentence cut through the office like a blade. Richard tried to recover. You don't know what kind of influence my family has in this district. Vivian's expression did not change. And you do not know what kind of files I have already reviewed. Blake's face shifted. A small, visible crack of fear appeared. Malcolm noticed it. Vivian did too. She leaned closer to the camera. Because this is not Blake Harrington's first incident. Is it? The office turned cold. Richard's jaw tightened. Blake whispered, Dad. Vivian's voice lowered. Start with Nora Bennett. Blake went pale so fast, even Tessa noticed. His confident posture collapsed. Ryan finally looked up, startled by the name. Ms. Ward's eyes widened as a memory surfaced. 1. The school had tried very hard to forget. Richard Harrington had entered the office believing money could purchase silence. But Vivian Monroe had brought something far more dangerous than money. She had brought the past, and the moment Nora Bennett's name entered the room, Blake Harrington stopped looking like a boy being protected by power and started looking like someone whose secrets were about to be dragged into the light. Nora Bennett was hiding in the farthest corner of the Westbridge High Library when Malcolm found her. She sat between two shelves of old history books, her knees drawn close, one hand wrapped tightly around her phone as if it were the only thing keeping her anchored. She had heard the whispers already. Everyone had... A new girl had been humiliated in the hallway. Blake Harrington was involved. The cameras were down. The school was calling it a misunderstanding. To most students, it sounded shocking. To Nora, it sounded familiar. Malcolm stopped a few feet away. Careful not to crowd her, Nora Bennett. She looked up, fear flashing across her face. I don't want trouble. I'm not here to give you trouble. Malcolm said, I'm here because Kiara Monroe got hurt today. And your name came up. Nora's eyes moved past him toward the library entrance, as if Blake might appear at any second. Then forget my name. Ms. Ward, who had followed Malcolm in, took one step closer. Her voice softened. Nora, if you know something, this may be the only chance to stop him. Nora shook her head. People said that last time. The words hit Ms. Ward hard, 3 months earlier. Nora had vanished from Westbridge after what the official report called a stairwell accident. The story had been clean, simple, and convenient. Nora slipped. Nora exaggerated. Nora's parents withdrew the complaint. Blake Harrington's name was mentioned once, then buried so deep in paperwork that even teachers who suspected the truth could not prove it. But Nora had not forgotten. Her silence was not loyalty, it was survival. Then Kiara stepped into the library. She had changed into a spare school sweatshirt, but her hair was still damp at the ends, and the faint chemical smell still followed her. Nora looked at her and stopped breathing for a moment. She saw not a stranger, but the next version of herself, the girl everyone would pity for a day, doubt by tomorrow, and forget by next week if nobody stopped the machine from turning. Kiara did not ask Nora to speak. She only said, "I know what it feels like when they make you prove you were hurt." Nora's face broke. Her fingers trembled as she unlocked her phone. "I kept everything," she whispered. Malcolm's expression sharpened. Everything. Nora opened a hidden folder buried behind a calculator app. Inside were screenshots, message, short videos, voice notes, and photos. Some showed Blake mocking students in private group chats. Others showed Tessa instructing people which parts of videos to delete before posting them. One clip showed Ryan apologizing to Nora months earlier, admitting he had seen what happened near the stairs but was too afraid to testify. There were names, dates, threats, proof of a pattern Westbridge had pretended not to see. "Ms." Ward covered her mouth. "Nora, I tried to tell them," Nora said, tears sliding down her face. "They said there wasn't enough evidence. Then Blake told everyone I made it up because I wanted attention." Malcolm sent a secure copy of the folder to Vivian, who was still on video call. Vivian's voice came through the speaker. "Controlled, but dangerous. Bring her to the disciplinary room. Now." When Nora entered the room, Blake's reaction gave him away before she said a word. His face went pale, then red. He stood so fast, his chair scraped against the floor. "What is she doing here?" Richard Harrington's eyes narrowed. "Blake, sit down." But Blake could not sit. Nora was not supposed to return. She was supposed to stay gone. Stay scared. Stay buried under the version of the story his father had paid everyone to accept. "She's lying." Blake snapped. "She lied before, and she's lying now." Nora lifted her phone. Her voice shook, but she did not lower it. "Then why did you say this?" She pressed play. Blake's own voice filled the room, smug and cruel. "Recorded months earlier, at Westbridge. I decide who gets believed." The room turned ice cold. Tessa looked like she might be sick. Ryan closed his eyes. Principal Grayson stared at the table, suddenly very interested in saying nothing. "Miss?" Ward's tears finally spilled, not from weakness, but from the weight of realizing how long the truth had been trying to reach the surface. Kiara looked at Nora's phone, then at Blake. In that moment, she understood the full shape of what had happened to her. She was not the first. She was not an accident. She was simply the first victim with a family powerful enough to drag the hidden pattern into daylight. Vivian's voice came through the phone again. "Malcolm, open every file." Malcolm did, and as Nora's folder unfolded on the screen, it became clear that Blake Harrington was not the only one exposed. The evidence pointed to teachers who ignored reports, administrators who closed complaints, and adults who chose comfort over courage. The list of people who had looked away was longer than anyone expected. And at the top of that list, again and again, was Principal Howard Grayson. Principal Grayson tried to close the folder before anyone else could see what Nora Bennett had brought into the room. But Malcolm Monroe's hand landed on the edge of the desk first. It did not grab the principal. He did not raise his voice. He only looked at the stack of printed screenshots, complaint numbers, and old incident dates. Then said, "I want Blake Harrington's full disciplinary record." Grayson's face tightened. "There is no full record. Blake has had minor conflicts, like many students his age. Nothing that justifies this kind of hostile investigation." Nora stepped forward before fear could stop her. "That's not true." Everyone turned toward her. Her voice shook, but she kept going. There were at least 3 complaints before mine. I remember the numbers because I wrote them down after they disappeared. Richard Harrington gave a cold laugh. This is absurd. You expect us to trust a student who has already made false claims. Nora ignored him and read from her phone. VB 2147. VB 1. VB Snul. The office secretary, who had been standing near the doorway with a clipboard pressed to her chest, went pale. Malcolm saw it immediately. Do those numbers mean something, he asked. The secretary hesitated. Grayson snapped. You don't need to answer that. That was the wrong thing to say. Malcolm turned fully toward her. Actually, she does. The secretary's eyes filled with panic. She looked at Ms. Ward, then at Kiara, then finally at Nora. Those files were moved. She whispered. Grayson's voice cut through the room. Enough. But the truth had already slipped out. Moved where Malcolm asked. The secretary swallowed. The old records room? The records room sat at the end of a narrow administrative hallway, behind a locked gray door that looked like it had not been opened in months. Grayson followed them reluctantly, Richard close behind him. Blake trailing with a face that no longer looked arrogant, only trapped. The secretary unlocked the door with trembling hands. Inside, metal filing cabinets lined the walls. Dust sat thick on cardboard boxes marked with vague labels, archived behavior reports, parent correspondence, informal resolutions. Malcolm pulled the first box down, then the second, then the third. The deeper they searched, the worse it became. Complaint after complaint appeared with the same pattern. A student reported intimidation, harassment, threats. Publique humiliation. A witness was listed. A meeting was scheduled. Then the file ended with the same phrase stamped across the final page: insufficient evidence. Kiara stood silently beside Nora, reading names of students she had never met but suddenly felt connected to. Each file was a voice that had been muted. Each page was proof that what happened in the hallway had not begun with her. It had only reached her. Ms. Ward picked up one report and froze. Her name was at the bottom. Her signature. But she had never signed it. This is forged, she said quietly. Grayson looked away. Miss? Ward's voice broke through the room. Sharper, now. I never wrote this. I never said Nora was exaggerating. I never recommended closing her complaint. Richard Harrington's composure finally cracked. Howard, you told me this was handled. The room went silent. Grayson whipped around. Richard. But Richard was too angry to stop himself. You promised me Blake's nonsense would never reach the board. Nobody moved. The words hung in the stale air of the records room like smoke from a gunshot. Malcolm slowly turned toward Richard. Thank you. Richard's mouth snapped shut. He had realized too late what he had just admitted. Grayson stepped toward the door. This conversation is over. Malcolm blocked his path. No. Now it is documented. Blake's breathing became uneven. Who had followed them at a distance? Stared at her phone like she was calculating one last way out. Ryan looked like he wished he had told the truth much sooner. Kiara watched them all, the principal who buried reports, the donor who bought silence, the bully who learned cruelty from protection, and the staff who looked away until the evidence became too heavy to ignore. She had thought Blake was the monster waiting in the hallway. Now she understood he was only the face of something larger. The hallway humiliation was not an isolated act. It was the visible wound of a system that had been crushing students long before she arrived. For a brief moment, it felt like the truth had finally won. Then, Tessa's phone buzzed. A sly, desperate look crossed her face. Before anyone could stop her, she stepped back into the hallway and hit upload. Within minutes, a new video spread through Westbridge High. It showed Kiara moving toward Blake. Blake raising the bottle, and students gasping in fear. It removed everything before and after. No blocked exit. No stolen photograph. No chemical attack. No, confession. No records room. The caption read, "New girl lies to destroy Blake Harrington." By the time Malcolm realized what Tessa had done, the damage was already moving faster than truth. Phones lit up across the school. Whispers turned into accusations. And within minutes, Westbridge began believing that Kiara Monroe was not the victim at all. Tessa's edited video moved through Westbridge High faster than any announcement the school had ever made. It jumped from one student group chat to another, then onto private stories, then into the crowded courtyard where students were already gathering between classes. In the clip, Kiara looked angry. Blake looked startled. The bottle appeared only after the moment Tessa wanted everyone to see. No one watching it could hear Blake's threats. I see Ryan blocking Kiara from behind, or understand why Kiara had stepped forward in the first place. The caption did the rest of the damage. New girl lies to destroy Blake Harrington. Within minutes, the whispers changed. Students who had gasped when Kiara was humiliated now stared at her like she was the problem. Some shook their heads. Others muttered that maybe Blake had been right. Blake felt the shift immediately. Standing near the courtyard steps, he straightened his jacket and let a thin smile return to his face. "People believe what they see first," he said, loud enough for Kiara to hear. "That's how the world works." Kiara stood frozen as phones turned toward her again. Her chest tightened. This was not just embarrassment anymore. It was memory. It was the same nightmare from her old school, the attack, the edited story, the crowd choosing the easier lie because the truth required courage. For a moment, the noise around her blurred. Nora reached for her hand, but Kiara pulled away. Not from anger, but because she was fighting not to break in front of the people who had already decided she was guilty. Malcolm stepped between Kiara and the crowd. He did not shout. He looked directly at Nora. "Check the file." Nora understood instantly. She took the video from a student who had reposted it and opened its data. Her fingers moved fast, but her face changed faster. "This isn't one clip," she said. "It's stitched together from 3 different files. The timestamps don't match." Tessa's eyes widened. "You can't prove that." Ryan, standing several feet away, looked at the crowd, then at Kiara, then at Blake. His guilt had been eating him alive since the conference room. Now he saw the lie spreading again, destroying the same girl twice in one day. His hand shook as he pulled out his own phone. "I can," Ryan said. Blake turned sharply. "Don't." But Ryan was done listening. He handed the phone to Malcolm. "I recorded from behind. I didn't post it because I was scared." Malcolm opened the video. This one showed everything from a different angle. Blake stepping into Kiara's path, Tessa positioning herself, Ryan blocking the exit, and Blake leaning toward Tessa before the attack. His voice was clear. "Cut the beginning. Nobody needs to know the truth." The courtyard went silent. Malcolm walked straight to the media room, connected Ryan's phone to the large display, and played the original footage, where dozens of students could see it through the open doors and hallway monitors. On a bit on. Phones lowered. The cruel comments stopped. The students who had just accused Kiara stared at the screen, watching the lie collapse in real time. Tessa began to cry. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." Blake spun toward Ryan, his face twisted with rage. "You traitor," Ryan flinched. But he did not back down. "No, I was a coward. There's a difference." The final piece of evidence had not come from Malcolm, Nora, or the school system. It had come from inside Blake's own circle. His last lie had been destroyed by the boy he thought was too weak to speak. Blake looked around for help. His father was not there. Grayson could not save him. Tessa was crying. Ryan had turned. The crowd no longer believed him. For the first time all day. Blake Harrington looked at Kiara Monroe without power. His voice dropped. "Please," he said. "Don't let this ruin my life." Kiara looked at him. "Calm now." No longer the girl frozen in the hallway. You should have thought about that before you tried to ruin mine. The emergency hearing was held in the Westbridge School Board conference room before the day had even ended. The long table was packed with board members, administrators, parents, and students who had been pulled into a story the school could no longer hide. Kiara sat between Vivian and Malcolm Monroe, her shoulders straight, her face calm. But her silence was different now. It was not fear. It was control. Across the room, Blake Harrington looked exhausted. His orange varsity jacket gone. His arrogance stripped away with it. Richard Harrington sat beside him with a private attorney, still trying to look powerful. But even he could feel the room no longer belonged to him. Vivian Monroe stood first. She did not shout. She did not need to. On the Biwan. She laid out the evidence with surgical precision. The original hallway video, the metadata proving Tessa's clip had been edited. The system logs showing the main camera had been disabled. Ryan's statement, Nora Bennett's hidden folder, and the buried complaints that had been moved into the old records room, every piece connected to the next. By the time she finished, the attack on Kiara was no longer a single act of cruelty. It was proof of a pattern. Principal Grayson tried to defend himself. My priority was protecting the reputation of Westbridge High. Ms. Ward stood before he could continue. Her voice shook, but she did not back down. Then why is my signature on a report I never wrote? She placed the forged document on the table. I never recommended closing Nora Bennett's complaint. Someone used my name to silence her. Nora Bennett stepped forward next. For months, she had carried the weight of being called a liar. Now she told the board how Blake had cornered her near the stairwell, how she had been injured, and how adults pressured her family to withdraw the complaint. Ryan followed, admitting he had helped Blake because he was afraid of becoming Blake's next target. I was wrong, he said. Being scared doesn't excuse what I did. Blake finally turned to Kiara. His voice cracked. Please, tell them it was a misunderstanding. If this goes on my record, my life is over. Kiara looked at him for a long moment. You didn't think about anyone's life when you were destroying theirs. No one spoke after that. The decision came quickly. Blake Harrington was suspended indefinitely, and his file was forwarded for further investigation. Tessa Vale was disciplined for creating and spreading false video evidence. Coach Daniels was suspended pending investigation for helping students exploit a disabled camera. Principal Grayson was placed under formal review for concealing complaints and mishandling records. Westbridge High was ordered to issue a public apology, reopen prior bullying complaints, and create an independent anti-bullying reporting system outside the principal's office. Richard Harrington sat frozen, unable to buy his son out of consequences. This time, Blake lowered his head, finally understanding that mercy could not be demanded from the person he had tried to break. But the greatest victory was not the punishment. It came days later. When everyone thought the story was finished, Kiara Monroe returned to the exact hallway where Westbridge had watched her humiliation begin. Kiara Monroe returned to Westbridge High 3 days later, and the hallway that once swallowed her in laughter was now silent for a completely different reason. No one blocked her path. No one raised a phone. No one whispered loud enough for her to hear. The same blue lockers lined the walls. The same polished floor reflected the overhead lights. And the same students stood in small groups near the classrooms. But everything felt changed. The place where she had been humiliated no longer belonged to Blake Harrington. It belonged to the truth that had finally been forced into the open. As Kiara walked forward, students who had watched and done nothing lowered their eyes. Some looked ashamed. Some looked afraid of what their silence had made possible. Kiara did not stop to comfort them. She did not owe them that. But she also did not carry herself like someone searching for revenge. Her steps were calm, steady, and heavier than they had been on her first day. She had walked through this hallway once as a target. Now she walked through it as the reason everyone could no longer pretend bullying was just a joke. Nora Bennett stepped out from beside the lockers and joined her. She did not say much. She did not need to. Standing beside Kiara was enough. For months, Nora had been made to feel like a liar. A problem. A story the school wanted, buried. Now she stood openly in the same hallway. No longer alone. A few feet away. Ryan Cole waited with his hands clenched at his sides. When Kiara approached, he stepped forward. "I'm sorry," Ryan said, his voice shaking. "For blocking you. For lying. For being scared." The hallway listened. Kiara looked at him for a long moment. "Being scared doesn't make what you did right." Ryan nodded, eyes wet. "I know. But from now on," Kiara continued, "stand with the truth before someone has to bleed for it." Ryan lowered his head. He had not been forgiven. Not fully. But he had been given something harder than forgiveness: responsibility. "Miss?" Ward appeared near the center of the hallway, holding a folder of new school policies. Her voice carried clearly over the students. Westbridge would now have an anonymous reporting line outside the principal's office. Every hallway camera would be audited by an independent technician. Old complaints would be reopened. No student would again be forced to sign a statement without a guardian or advocate present. For the first time, the rules sounded like they had been written to protect students, not reputations. At the far end of the hallway, Malcolm Monroe stood with his arms folded. He did not step in. He did not speak for Kiara. He simply watched as his sister reclaimed the place where others had tried to reduce her to fear. Kiara stopped near the wall, where the liquid had once run down her hair and onto her clothes. The stain had been cleaned, but she knew exactly where it had been. Nora stood beside her. Kiara looked at the wall, then at the students watching from every side. "Justice doesn't always have to be loud," she said quietly. "But when it arrives, every lie has to kneel." No one answered. They did not need to. Blake Harrington no longer walked those halls like a king. Principal Grayson no longer sat behind his desk pretending silence was leadership. And Kiara Monroe did not become a person consumed by revenge. She became the girl who forced an entire school to look at what it had allowed. A girl had been humiliated in a hallway, and the system built to ignore her had been exposed because of it. This time, the ones who made others beg for mercy were the ones begging for it themselves. And the story ended with one cold truth. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one carrying the storm. And that brings us to the end of this unforgettable story. What started as a cruel act of humiliation against a young black girl became the moment an entire system of lies, intimidation, and silence finally collapsed. Kiara didn't win because she was stronger, louder, or more powerful than her bullies. She won because she refused to let the truth die, even when everyone around her wanted her to stay quiet. In the end, the people who thought they were untouchable learned a lesson they will never forget. Sooner or later, every lie runs out of places to hide. Now, we'd love to hear from you if you had been standing in that hallway. Would you have stepped in to help Kiara? Or do you think most people would have stayed silent? Let us know in the comments below. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories of justice and unforgettable comebacks. We'll see you in the next story.